Hello. John Michael, Context is Everything Media Network, Healing the Child Within, Chapter 9. Beginning to deal with core issues. An issue is any conflict, concern, or potential problem, whether conscious or unconscious, that is incomplete for us or needs action or change. There are at least 14 core issues in the recovery of child within that we can work through. 8 of these have been described by clinicians and authors, including Gravitz, Bowden, Cermak, and Brown, and Fisher. These core issues are control, trust, feelings, being over-responsible, neglecting our own needs, or all or nothing thinking and behaving, high tolerance for inappropriate behavior, and low self-esteem. To these I have added being real, grieving or ungrieving losses, or grieving our ungrieved losses, fear of abandonment, difficulty resolving conflict, and difficulty grieving and receiving love. As problems, concerns, conflicts, or patterns come up in our life, we can bring them up with selected, safe, and supportive people. At first, it may not be clear just which of these core issues, or perhaps more than one of them, At first, it may not be clear which of these core issues, or perhaps more than one of them, is involved for us. Core issues do not present themselves to us as an issue. Rather, they present at first as a problem in everyday life. However, with persistent considering describing how we feel, it will generally become clear which issue or issues are involved. This knowledge will be helpful in gradually getting free of our confusion, discontent, unconscious negative life patterns. All or nothing thinking and acting. This is the ego defense that therapists call splitting. When we think or act this way, we do so at either one extreme or the other. For example, either we love someone completely or we hate them. There is no middle ground. We see people around us as either good or bad, and not the composite they really are. We judge ourselves equally as harshly. The more we use all or nothing thinking, the more it opens up to behaving in an all or none fashion. Both of these actions tend to get us in trouble and to cause us to suffer unnecessarily. We may become attracted to others who think and behave in an all or nothing fashion. But being around this kind of person tends to result in more trouble and suffering for us. Table 3 lists types of parental conditions associated with dynamics of ACOAs, adult children of alcoholics. The adult children from other dysfunctional families as well. While all or none thinking can occur in any of these parental conditions, it occurs especially often among fundamentalist religious parents. They are often rigid, punitive, judgmental, and perfectionistic. They are often a shame-based system which attempts to cover over and even destroy the true self. All or none thinking is similar to active alcoholism, other chemical dependencies, codependence, or other active addictions. The attachment in that it sharply and unrealistically limits our possibilities and choices. To be so limited makes us feel constricted, and we are unable to be creative and to grow in our day-to-day lives. In recovery, we begin to learn that most things in our life, including our recovery, are not all or none, not either or. Rather, they are both and. They have shades of gray, and somewhere in the middle, a 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, and not a 0 or a 10. Control. I'm using a new camera today, so that was a little blip in the camera. Control. Control is perhaps the most dominant issue in our lives. No matter what we think we have to control, whether someone else's behavior or our own behavior or something else, our codependent self tends to latch on to this notion that it won't let go. This result is often suffering, confusion, and frustration. Ultimately, we cannot control life, so the more that we try to control it, the more out of control we feel because we are focusing so much attention on it. Frequently, the person who feels out of control is obsessed with the need to be in control. Another word for control is attachment. Wise people have found that attachment or needing to be in control is the basis for suffering. Certainly, suffering is part of life. We all may have to suffer before we can begin to consider our alternatives. Suffering may point out the path toward peace of mind. Other alternatives that nearly always relieves. One alternative that nearly always relieves our suffering is surrender. We surrender our false or codependent self and our attachment to the notion that we can control anything. We slowly find that one of the most powerful healing acts is giving up our need to always be in control. This freedom is that of our true self, our child within. In this context, the word surrender does not mean to give up or to lie down in the military sense of the losing of a war. Rather, we mean that one who surrenders wins the struggle of trying to control and ameliorates most of the resultant needless suffering. This becomes an ongoing process in life, not a goal to be achieved only once. Needing to be in control is intimately related to and includes needing to be in control is intimately related to and includes several other major life issues: willpower, fear of losing control; dependence and independence; trust, experience, feelings, especially all or none, and expectations of self and others. Many people have not worked through these important life issues. However, most of the time they believe that they have overcome, i.e., controlled these issues and all other life problems. They even believe that they can somehow control life itself. It is hard to learn that life cannot be controlled. Life's powerful and mysterious process goes on no matter what we do. Life cannot be controlled because it is far too rich, spontaneous, and rambunctious to be fully understood, much less controlled by the thinking, controlling ego/mind. At this point, we can discover that there is a way out, a way to get free of the suffering associated with our always needing to be in control. The way out is to surrender, and then to become gradually a co-creator of life. I describe the process of being a co-creator in Alcoholism and Spirituality. I believe that's the name of another book. This is where the spiritual aspects of recovery come into play as a powerful aid. Attendance at and working 12-step recovery programs such as Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous Narcotics Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous is helpful. The other spiritual paths may also be helpful. The work on our control issues by asking for help from appropriate others and by letting go. When we do this, we begin to discover our true self and we begin to feel more alive. I have a note that I want to write down here, so pardon me for about 20 seconds. You may talk among yourselves while I do this. This is a note for myself and for songwriting that I realized through reading. I can probably make cohesive song lyrics if I use the thematics from a self-help book as the kind of scaffolding to the lead up to some sort of a culmination at the end of a song that has some sort of, what would you call it, moral truth, or at least it can coherently articulate as a moral truth, as a book would coherently articulate a moral of the story at the end. So just like, as a way to kind of refine my songwriting, that it might be a little bit more coherent lyrically. And we're back after those words from our sponsors. Being over-responsible. Many of us who grew up in troubled and dysfunctional families learned to become overly responsible. That often seemed to be the only way to avoid many of our painful feelings, such as anger, fear, and hurt. It also gave us the illusion of being in control. But what seemed to work then doesn't always work now. A 40-year-old patient of mine told me that he always said yes to requests at work, and doing that was causing him a lot of suffering. By working on himself for 2 years in group therapy, and by taking a course of assertiveness, he has learned to say no. But to let others do what he cannot do or does not want to do. He is discovering his true self, his child within. Instead of being over-responsible, other people may be irritable, passive, and feel as if they are victim of the world. It is equally helpful for them to work in recovery on these issues. Some benefit for assertiveness training. Neglecting our needs. Disowning and neglecting our own needs is intimately related to being over-responsible. Both are part of the true and false self. It may be useful at the point of to review Chapter 4. At this point to review Chapter 4. Some may find it helpful to make a copy of Table 2, which lists some of the human needs, and to put this list where it can be seen easily and often, perhaps to carry it with us. By observing and by working on recovery, we can begin to identify people and places where we can get these needs met in a healthy manner. Gradually, as more and more of our needs are met, we discover a crucial truth, that we are our most influential, effective, and powerful person who can help us get what we need. The more we realize this, the more we can seek out, ask for, and actually realize our needs. As we do so, our child within begins to awaken and eventually to flourish, grow, and create. Virginia Satir said, "We need to see ourselves as basic miracles and worthy of love." High tolerance for inappropriate behavior. Children from troubled and dysfunctional families grow up not knowing what is normal, healthy, or appropriate, having no other reference point on which to test reality. They think their family and their life is, with its inconsistency, its trauma, and its suffering, is the way it is. In fact, when we assume the role of our false or codependent self, which troubles families, friendships, and work environments tend to promote, we become fixed in this role. We don't realize that there is another way to be. In recovery, with appropriate supervision and feedback from skilled and safe others, we slowly learn what is healthy and what is appropriate. Other related issues include being over-responsible, neglecting our own needs, feeling boundary issues, and shame and low self-esteem. Tim was a 30-year-old single man who had been in our therapy group for 2 months. He told us, "When I was a kid, I felt trapped into having to listen to my father's irrational talk and behavior. When he was drinking, which was every night and almost weekends, when I would try to get away from him, I felt so guilty, and my mother added to it by telling me how selfish I was. Even today, as an adult, I let people treat me badly. I let some almost walk all over me. But until I found out about the adult children of troubled families and started reading about it and going to meetings, I thought something was wrong with me." Tim is learning about his high tolerance for others' inappropriate behavior and is beginning to get free of this often subtle form of mistreatment. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being abandoned goes all the way back to our earliest seconds, minutes, and hours of existence. Related to the issue of trust and distrust, it is often exaggerated among children who grew up in troubled or dysfunctional families. Thus, to counter this fear, we often mistrust, we shut out our feelings so we don't feel the hurt. Some of my patients reported that their parents threatened to leave or abandon them as a disciplinary measure when they were infants or young children. Yikes. This is cruelty and trauma that may appear to be benign to the surface, although, in my opinion, it is a covert form of child abuse. Juan was a 34-year-old divorced man, a successful writer who grew up in a troubled, dysfunctional family. He told us about in the group, I can't remember much about my life before the age of 5. But at that time, my father left me, my mother, and my younger sister out of the blue. He had told my mother he had a job to do out west and would be back. But he didn't tell us kids, and what's more, my mother shipped me off to live with my aunt 600 miles away without telling me why. I must have been shocked. I denied it all until now. Just in the past few months, I've got in touch with my feelings that not only did that SOB abandon me, but my mother rejected me. That must have really hurt that little boy inside of me. I'm just now beginning to get angry about that, too. At a subsequent session, he told us, one way I learned to handle people abandoning me was to not get too close to them. And with certain women, I'd get very close to them. But if any conflict came up for very long, I'd leave them right away. I can view it now that I was abandoning them before they could leave me. Juan continues to work on his feelings of hurt and anger in dealing with his important issues in his recovery. Recovery from abandonment. Difficulty handling and resolving conflicts. Difficulty handling and resolving conflicts is a core recovery issue for adult children. It touches upon and interacts with most of the other core issues. Growing up in a troubled or dysfunctional family, we learn to avoid conflict whenever possible. When conflict occurs, we learn mostly to withdraw from it in some way. Occasionally, we become aggressive and try to overpower those with whom we are in conflict. When these techniques fail, we may become devious and attempt to manipulate. In dysfunctional environments, these methods may help assure our survival, but they do not tend to work in healthy, intimate relationships. Recovery itself, healing our child within, is built on discovering conflict after conflict and then working through each. But fear and other painful feelings that can't come up as well as we get closer to the conflict may be too much for us to experience. Rather than face the pain, the conflict head on, we may revert to our prior methods. These may include, I cannot do it on my own. A problem is that doing it on our own is not worked well for us. Joanne was 4-year-old woman who had been in a group therapy for adult children of dysfunctional families for 7 months. She tried to be the dominant member of the group, but when Ken joined the group, he tried to be assertive with her, and at times was aggressive enough to cause her difficulty and frustration in being as dominant as she had been. After several altercations between Joanne and Ken, Joanne announced that she had decided to leave the group. Upon exploration by the group, their basic conflict was revealed. My co-leader and I said, Joanne, Ken, and the group are at a crucial point in their recovery. You are right in the middle of an important conflict. You have an opportunity here, since this group is a safe place, to work through a core issue for each of you. In the past, how have you handled conflict? The group members discussed how they often ran away from it, or became aggressive, or even manipulative, and that had not worked for them. A group member said to Joanne, "You really do have a chance to work through this, though. I hope you don't leave." She said she was thinking about it, and the next week she returned and she had decided to stay in the group. She told the group that she felt that they didn't listen to her and support her, and that since Ken had joined the group, had felt more so. More issues were revealed, including that she had always had difficulty recognizing her needs and getting them met. She also had always felt unappreciated and unloved by her parents. She, Ken, and the group worked on their conflict, and other cause of several group therapy sessions had resolved itself. The handling and resolving of conflict, we first recognize when that we are in it. We then take risk, if we feel safe, to disclose our concerns, feelings, and needs. By working through conflict, we learn more to identify and work through past conflicts and current ones as they come up. It takes courage to recognize and to work through conflict, beginning to talk about our issues. In recovery, we begin to report from the depths of our true self such experiences and fears as that of being abandoned. When we share our feelings, concerns, confusions, and conflicts in the company of safe, accepting people, we construct a story that we might not ourselves be able to tell. While it is useful for others to hear our stories, the most useful and healing thing about telling our own story is that we, the storyteller, get to hear our story. Before we tell it, we don't know exactly how it will come out. So no matter which concern, problem, or life issue we may want to work on, risking and beginning to talk about it with a safe person or persons is a way out of unnecessary burden of remaining silent. And when we tell our story from our hearts, bones, and guts, from our real self, we discover the truth about ourselves. Doing so is healing. Most often, when core issues and conflicts come up for us early in recovery, the codependent self actually disguises them into other guises or masks. A task in recovery for us is to learn to recognize issues when they come up. One of the advantages in talking with the safe others about our concerns is that doing so helps to expose or clarify our issues. Other issues. Of the remaining major and core issues of recovery, I have already discussed that the low self-esteem and shame in Chapter 6. Throughout this book, I discuss the issue of being real, grieving, and resolving conflict. And finally, triggering core issues. Many situations can trigger our core issues, so they become activated and begin to enter into our lives more overtly. One situation is an intimate relationship, one in which two or more people dare to be real selves with one another. In an intimate relationship, we share parts of us that we rarely share with others. Such sharing immediately raises issues like trust, feelings, and responsibility. When we have the opportunity for many intimate relationships, while we have the opportunity for many intimate relationships in recovery, our relationship with our counselor, therapist, therapy group, and group members or sponsor can and does trigger many issues. To deal with these most constructively, we can be our real self as much as possible. This requires us to surrender, to trust, to risk, to participate. And all of this is potentially frightening. Other situations that often trigger or precipitate the surfacing of these issues include going through major life transition, demands on our performance at work, home, or play, and especially making visits to our parents. When the feelings, frustrations, and issues surface, we can begin to get free of them if we are real and if we share our real self with safe people whom we can trust. That's it. Have a good day. God bless. Goodbye.